Test, 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 test. Got it?
Can I adjust it? Okay. Alrighty, can everyone hear me? Testing, testing. Hello. Hi everyone, good afternoon. We're gonna go ahead and get started in a few moments. So whenever you can, go ahead and take a seat and we'll get started. There are captions on the screen available, thanks to Tracy, our cart captioner for this afternoon. And we'll go ahead and get started momentarily. Alrighty. Give it the next slide. The next slide. Thanks. Alrighty. So thank you everyone for being here today. My name is Emily Camacho. I'm your local engagement manager for Cochlear Americas. It is a cochlear implant manufacturing company. What an engagement manager does is educate the general public and individuals with hearing loss about hearing solutions, implantable hearing solutions. So a little bit of background about myself. I'm a audiologist by trade, and I'm also a bilateral cochlear implant recipient. And I wore hearing aids for quite some time before transitioning over. So it's really nice to see a good turnout today. I hope you learned something from this, and I'm excited that you'll get to meet Lou Ferrigno, the original Hulk, towards the end of today's event. So our mission at Cochlear, we have quite a few things, but in general, we create technology that is helpful to build and reconnect people to their everyday situations and lives. And so with everything that we do, we have individuals with hearing loss, myself included, at the forefront of everything. So everything we do, we have Bluetooth connectivity for a reason. We have backwards compatibility, meaning you can get implanted with the cochlear implant and still be able to upgrade to whatever current technology is present at that time. So we are constantly innovating and creating technology to, again, reintroduce people into the hearing world, introduce people to the hearing world if they have not ever heard sound before. And it's really an honor to be here to talk to you about this today. Next slide, please. So just a little bit of background about Lou Ferrigno. He is the original Hulk. I love hearing his story. I met him for the first time yesterday, so I'm really excited that he will be here to share a little bit about his journey, his hearing journey, about getting a cochlear implant. He has a pretty unique story, and one that I think many of us can relate to in some way, shape, or form, even if we are coming from a different walk of life. We also have some guest speakers today. So we have the Hearing Loss Association of America. We have our West Valley chapter here today, Melanie O'Rourke, who's also a cochlear implant recipient. I love her, she's awesome. And she's one of our cochlear volunteers. So she will be sharing on a local level of how you can get involved in the community. And there is another chapter in East Valley. So if you know people there, or if you also live in that area, we can connect you to the right people. We also have Happy Ears Hearing Center. It is a private practice. There are 3 locations throughout the Metro Phoenix area, 2 of them in the West Valley, being Peoria and Surprise, Arizona. And there also is a location in Mesa. And I will let Dr. Dusna, who's the audience and owner of the practice, I'll have her come up and share information about what services they provide at those locations. All right, so this is our agenda. It's very brief. I know you are probably more excited to hear about Lou and take photos afterwards. I do keep my portion of the presentation pretty brief. So this is just a breakdown of our agenda. A little bit about hearing loss. We'll talk about how cochlear implants work, what you can do about it, and then we'll leave some time for some Q&A before we line up to take a photo with Lou Ferrigno afterwards. So this is a very hard question to answer because hearing is very much different from vision If you have 20/20 vision, you can put on glasses for corrective lenses to get to that point. Usually you'll be able to resolve your vision difficulties or whatever it is that you may have, but hearing is much more complex. There's still a lot that we don't know about the hearing nerve, the anatomy, and how our brains work and how it processes auditory information. So I want you to think about what exactly does it mean to be hearing 20/20, so to speak. Okay, and a lot of this is the stigma that surrounds hearing loss and why many people do not often address it for whatever reason. And so our goal at Cochlear, and in general in organizations like HLAA, our goal is to educate the public and people about hearing loss so that you can do something instead of just waiting and starting to sway or distance yourself from your everyday or typical social situations that you would otherwise be a part of. So I'm going to briefly just cover the various levels of an audiogram or hearing test if you have not already seen one before. And so we have negative 10 decibels going all the way up to 20 decibels of being normal hearing sensitivity or near normal hearing sensitivity, which means you can hear soft speech and sounds at a very low level without the use of amplification. When you start to see those little thresholds, those plots on the audiogram, lower on the graph, that means things need to be louder for you to hear it, even if it's a soft beep or tone. And so that's when you start to go into the mild to moderate hearing level range. And then you have the severe to profound hearing level range, meaning if you do not have amplification, you otherwise would be missing probably about 90% of what's being said if you are in that severe to profound hearing range. So if you can answer yes to any or all or most of these questions, that may be a time to either reconsider getting new amplification if you have not done that. Technology is constantly changing, so if you have 9-year-old hearing aids, it might be time to revisit, get another set sometime soon. If hearing aids are adequately programmed and we've optimized them as much as we can, that is a time to reconsider, a cochlear implant evaluation. And we are here to help you get set up with that. Okay. All right. So really briefly, it's a 2-part system, the cochlear implant. There's an internal component that is placed via general anesthesia in an outpatient surgery typically, and you go home the same day and you are back to your usual routine within a few days to a week or so with minimal pain. Of course, be in communication with your providers if there is something abnormal with the recovery process, but it is a pretty straightforward and routine process at this point. The external sound processor, that is going to be the part that you see, kind of like if you were wearing hearing aids, that is the external sound processor. And with Cochlear, you get the option between 2 different kinds. So you can either get a behind-the-ear sound processor, which is our newest sound processor, the Nucleus 8, or you can get the off-the-ear sound processor, which is the Kanso 2. But as a buddy system, one does not work without the other. The internal implant does nothing until you have a power source connected to it, and that is the external sound processor with the battery. So with hearing aids, we're merely making things louder in the specific regions for where there is hearing loss present. So it's amplifying those things. And I know a lot of you probably experience feedback if you have a hearing loss and you're wearing hearing aids, hugging people, you can have some feedback present, things like that. That is because that's creating a feedback loop. It's an acoustic way of hearing. With cochlear implants, it's different. So it's an electrical stimulation, electrical impulse. It still works the same way in that it has microphones that picks up the sound, processing strategies that pick up the sound, and it converts it into a digital signal to send an electrical impulse to the hearing nerve. So it's wrapped inside the cochlea, and that auditory information is sent up to the brain via the hearing nerve. So we don't hear with our ears, we hear with our brains. And if we don't have adequate access to all of these sounds and speech in our environment, we need things to be louder. And even then, we get to a point where hearing aids are no longer doing the trick, and we need things to be more clear. And that's when we start talking about evaluations for other technologies, like our bone conduction hearing solutions that we have, or specifically our cochlear implant. So we've done a lot of research. Our company has been around for over 40 years, and we've done a lot of research for patients who have gone from a candidate to a recipient, and they've observed them over an extended period of time. And what we have found is that when you receive a cochlear implant, when you have more adequate access to sounds, you have a higher quality of life. You're getting back to doing the things that you did before if you've had hearing or normal hearing before. You have a higher rate of employment opportunities because you're able to communicate with people, to talk on the phone, to hear in background noise, locate where sounds are coming from. You know, the benefits are limitless. And I know a surgery kind of sounds a little bit cumbersome or, worrisome to many. I'm one of those people, so I'm here to help talk you through that and reassure you that getting a cochlear implant, especially if you are a candidate, it will open up your world of opportunity for you. And just another, I've already said this, we don't want to wait to adjust your hearing loss. The longer you have hearing loss present and you don't do something about it, the longer it is to adjust, the longer it takes to adjust and acclimate. Whether you are going from never wearing hearing aids before to wearing hearing aids, that will be an adjustment period. If you're going from hearing aids to a cochlear implant, that is also an adjustment period. It's just a different way of listening, and there are a lot of tools and strategies out there that can help with this. So these are our next steps of what we recommend if you have not already been seen for a cochlear implant evaluation. I'm going to have Dr. Dusnop come up and share a little bit about what their clinics provide, what services they provide. We will also provide you with contact information. They have some cards as well, so we can get you set up for an appointment at Happy Ears Hearing Center. So please give a round of applause for Dr. Dusnop, who's going to come up and share.
Thanks, Dr. Camacho. Can you guys all hear me? All right. Well, I am Dr. Dusnop. I am with Happy Ears Hearing Center, and we are a group of audiologists in our practice. So we see all ages, starting from newborns all the way up until, you get into the 80s and 90s. And so we definitely work with all types of hearing loss. We also recently started working with patients who have vestibular issues and vertigo. We have 2 balance centers now where we see patients for that as well. So we really love working with cochlear implants in our office. It's nice to have patients come in, and sometimes it's sad when we see patients who've purchased hearing aids over and over and over again when they're really more of a cochlear implant candidate than they are a hearing aid candidate. So we do a lot of the testing in the office for the cochlear implant candidacy evaluations, and then we also do the programming after the surgeries. We work with quite a few surgeons in Phoenix just to provide the best outcomes for patients. So it's something that most of our providers are trained in each of the locations that we have, from our Surprise office, Peoria, and Mesa. So we see patients out of all of these offices with all the different types of hearing devices. So we're very passionate about what we do. We love seeing patients hear better, and we like to help improve that quality of life. So if you guys have any questions afterwards, feel free to come up and ask us questions.
Nicole has something to say. She's working her way up.
Hi, Shanna. Can you explain what the process is after surgery at your office for a cochlear implant?
Yes. So when someone has surgery and they're working with one of the surgeons that we have, affiliation with, they typically will follow up with the surgeon for their first follow-up appointment, and then they're given the green light to come to our office for the activation appointment. So when you come into the office that first time, there's a nice big goodie bag that Cochlear gives you full of everything. And so we go through the process of setting up your device, orienting you to it, and then there's also a lot of work that you have to put into it as well. So I think that's the biggest thing that patients don't understand, and so I think it's getting better. People are getting more educated on that, but it's not something that's a one-time fit and you're not going to come back. You're going to come back quite a bit, especially in the beginning. So we like to see you back fairly frequently as you adjust to hearing with that implant. We also do follow-up testing in the booth to make sure that that implant is functioning properly and that you're getting the sound that you need.
Thank you, Dr. Dusnap. We have a question in the audience of where can they get surgeries done? What partnership do you have with any of the local surgeons, if you have a list or if you have a few that you refer to?
Yeah, we work with quite a few of the surgeons in the Valley, so Dr. Cassis, Dr. Stevens, Dr. Macias. There's a group that we work quite a bit with, so if you guys have questions about that, it really just depends on where you have to have the surgery, who you want to work with. We recommend, we recommend who we recommend, but you also have to choose who you feel like is best for you, so.
All right, are there any other questions? Yep, running over to you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Matt Deller, and I have a question about the after process, so to speak, again. I wanted to hear a little more detail about that. And, once you get the implant, how long does it take for someone normally to achieve the hearing they want to have? I mean, how long of a period of time? I'm sure it's different with everybody, but I've heard some people tell me that it takes a while, and it's almost as if you have to teach your brain to refunction in a different way, and I'm very curious about that.
Yeah.
I've got bilateral. I've been deaf almost all my life. I'm on that side of what you had on the board there in the 90 decibel frame, but I'd like to know.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think it depends on the person. So we see some people who have worn hearing aids most of their life. They've done fairly well with hearing devices, and then they get a cochlear implant. And if you've been a consistent user, we have patients that even within a couple months are doing amazing with the cochlear implant. We have patients that it might take 6 months to a year to do well with the cochlear implant. A lot of it is the effort that you put into it after the surgery. There's a lot of practicing you have to do and listening exercises that you have to do. There's also the fact that some people might have been profoundly hard of hearing their entire life, and now they're getting a cochlear implant. Maybe they have or haven't consistently worn hearing devices. And so that can affect how long it takes as well for you to get used to the cochlear implant. So it's variable. I mean, we've had patients come in right off the bat and they're just doing so much better even after the second appointment. And then we have patients where, they're having to put a lot of work into it and try. Part of it too is cognition, and if it takes you a little bit longer to process things and process information, that's going to take a little longer to get used to the cochlear implant as well. So it's kind of variable, depends on the patient and how long they've had that hearing loss. But that's a good question.
We have another question of what does the cochlear implant evaluation look like?
So cochlear implant evaluations, at least in our office, we split into 2 appointments. So if you haven't had a hearing test recently, typically we'll have you come in and we'll just do a comprehensive hearing evaluation. We test you with background noise. There's just different things that we do for that first part of the test. If you've had your hearing tested somewhere else, we're probably still going to retest you because we want to know that the results that we get are the ones that we know what we do, so we know that that's, we're comfortable with our tests that we do. The second part of the cochlear implant eval, after we determine if, based on your audiogram, you look like you're probably going to be a candidate for a cochlear implant, we'll have you come back, and then we program some hearing devices for you that we know are appropriately fit for your hearing loss. And then we do testing in the booth with a lot of different sentences, different voices. Some of them are men's voices, deep voices, tenor voices, high-pitched women's voices, deeper women's voices, and then we add background noise as well. So there's a lot of different tests. The second part of the test can take a little while, lots of listening and repeating things back, because we want to see if you have hearing devices that are appropriately fit. are you actually able to hear pretty well with those, or are you still struggling to the point that that's not going to be a good option for you? So it's involved. It's not just a one test, and yes, we're getting an implant. There's a lot to it, so.
There is a question about insurance, and I'm happy to answer that one, but are there any questions specific to Dr. Dusnap? Okay, I'm gonna run over there. 1 second. I can run in heels, I promise.
What about swimming and taking a shower? Can you get it wet?
Yeah, so that's probably a good question for cochlear as well, but so typically the nice thing about the cochlear implants, especially cochlear, is that they do have waterproof covers that you can actually wear in the pool, where you're not really able to do that with hearing aids. So it is nice if you want to be able to hear in the pool or be around people in the pool or outside where it's, you know, lots of water activities and stuff. With a cochlear implant, you can still wear that. Showering doesn't matter because once you take it off, everything's sealed underneath the skin. So there's nothing exposed that is going to be affected by a shower. It's all internal, other than the piece that you wear on the outside. So.
All right, are there any other questions specific? Oh, okay, running over. I love the flower shirt. What is your name? Susan. Hi, Susan. All right, go ahead and ask your question.
Since you have the protective cover for the cochlear, do you also have the protective cover for the Baha?
So that's a good question. So there isn't one that I'm aware of for the Baha because of the way it snaps onto the abutment that you have. It's a little bit different, but with the cochlear implant, they have a different headpiece that's waterproof as well as the cover for the device.
All right. And, oh, okay.
How does the sound that you hear with an implant compare to the sound that you hear or heard with a hearing aid? And does it take a while to adjust to that?
Yeah, so that's probably a good question for Dr. Camacho, but it's a completely different way of hearing. So it's not the sound that you get through a hearing aid. That's something that you're hearing from the hearing device itself. The cochlear implant is an electronic internal device. So I don't know if you want to answer that since you've had both.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. It's a very different way of hearing. I will say that I have more access to mid to high frequencies, mid to high pitched sounds, which account for a lot of the clarity of speech. I am now completely deaf. I had a mild to moderate hearing loss as a child, and that it just got progressively worse over time. So I do know that story of, you know, okay, my hearing aids are no longer doing the trick for me. What is my next option? And that brought back a lot of the clarity of speech, but it did take some time. Like Dr. Dusnap mentioned, it's not a one visit and it sounds perfect. What we can say is you will hear something on day one, probably something that you had not heard before or in a while. What it sounds like to you is hard to say, but with time and with programming, and that's where their expertise comes in. With time and programming and your practice and persistence, things will start to sound more natural and normal the more you're using it and the more you're going to those follow-up visits.
And I can say too, I had a patient recently that was implanted, and she's always been a hearing aid user, and she's a chef. She just graduated from chef school. And the first thing she said within like 2 months of activating her was she was using a paper towel and Crisco on tinfoil. And she's like, oh my gosh, I've never heard that before. So that was a sound that she didn't even know made a sound, and she was actually hearing that with her cochlear implant. So she started with one, and now she wants to get the other ear done because she's hearing so much better with the implant than she was doing with the hearing device. So there's sounds that you probably don't realize you've never heard if your hearing's in that range until you get the cochlear implant, and it brings those back up for you. But it is different. It's not the same type of sound as you'll get from a hearing device.
Well, just kind of a statement and a question. Those of us who have worn hearing aids since we were very young, like me, 5 years old, have relied on reading lips all my life. So it's a little different for us, and we would never know what it would be like if we never got a cochlear implant. We would be used to what we have and be either satisfied with it or not. Well, recently I got the Exceed 1, the Oticon Exceed hearing aids, and it's just like a whole new world for me, 147 decibels, baby. I've got everything I need, I think. I don't know for sure. So I guess my question is, I'm a musician and I direct choir, and what kind of feedback are you getting from people regarding music? How do they hear music now? I'd love to know. I would love to meet 20 people and ask them about their different experiences with music before I do this.
I think it's different for everyone, right? And Dr. Camacho can probably say this too. We have some patients that get the cochlear implant, and I think the new electrodes that they have are a lot different than the electrodes that were implanted, 10 years ago. So the new ones, the feedback I'm getting is that the music sounds pretty good. They can hear the beat, but there's some people that, if you heard music normally at some point in your life, it's going to sound totally different with a cochlear implant. But if you haven't heard music other than mostly the beat of the music and stuff, and you're really missing out on a lot of those instruments, then the cochlear implant is going to give you some of those sounds back. But she's probably the better person for that since she's had experience with both. So
Yeah, I mean, everyone's experience is different. I'm a frequent concert goer. I go to festivals all the time. I just realized that I just remember that the room is looped, and I never thought to change my processors, so I'm hearing my voice extra loud in my head right now. But that just goes to show how great this technology is. But yes, music will definitely come last, because if you want to understand, you're getting sound awareness first, then you're getting that, the detection, comprehension, then you start to be able to understand a little bit better and more complex listening environments like background noise, restaurants, whatever. Music tends to come last because of how complex music can be. And so that really is kind of the last thing that falls into place. It will never be, what I remember to be normal. But again, this sounds better than what I remember to be normal. But so it really is hard to say. It's based on your hearing history, how long you've been deaf for. Did you wear amplification the entire time to stimulate your hearing nerve? Like, all of these things are factors into how it's going to sound. But I will say that a cochlear implant would not be a recommendation to you if they did not feel that you would be hearing better with the cochlear implant versus what you are currently utilizing.
Well, the other thing too with that is the nice thing about cochlear is you can still use the bimodal solution. So just meaning, usually they implant the ear that's worse than the one you're hearing with a hearing device with. So if you still have a hearing device on one side and then the processor on the other side, the way your brain puts it together in the middle, it sounds better because you still have some of that hearing that you're used to that's normal for you, but then you're getting the clarity from the other device and your brain puts it together in the middle. So having bimodal solutions is also good, and some people start out with the processor on one side and they keep the hearing aid, and then sometimes they'll say, oh my gosh, I'm doing so much better with the processor that I want to get the other side done too. So I think it's really just patient specific, but having the option of the hearing device that works with the cochlear implant on the other side, that's going to help preserve some of the music sound quality too, if you still have hearing that can do that.
Okay, we have one more question, and then we're going to hand off the mic to Melanie O'Rourke. She's the president of West Valley HLAA chapter. So you are the last question.
Yeah. I have a question. Speech therapy after cochlear implant or other resources to help you practice hearing, like an app on the phone or on the computer, or you guys provide all that information?
Yeah, so I don't have the names of any speech therapists that work with adults, but I don't know if you guys do. There's a lot of resources though for listening exercises where it's almost like a game and you can practice hearing words and learning how to hear those words with your implants so you get more familiar with them. I think by hearing your speech, that you'll hear your speech differently if you're able to hear certain sounds, and so you know there's things you can do with that too. There's a lot of therapy for auditory processing issues as well, so sometimes by working with someone who's skilled in that area, you can improve some of those skills when you're actually getting the auditory input. I don't know if you guys... I'm not sure. That would be a good question for Cochlear if they have any resources for that. But I know there's a lot of listening exercises, and the website with Cochlear has a lot of information on it for listening exercises and things like that as well.
Yeah, we definitely do have a lot of resources that I can share with you. We have a recipient solutions manager who works with the recipients primarily after, implantation. She provides those oral rehabilitative tools, including apps that are specific to Cochlear, non-specific apps, specific to Cochlear, just to be able to, expose yourself to as much auditory input as possible. And we can provide that information afterwards.
Yeah, we don't have oral rehab in our office, but there are providers that do that. So that is something you can do.
All right.
Which is helpful. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dusnab. If you want to give her a round of applause, thank you. All right, and now we'll have Melanie O'Rourke, if you would like to come up and share a little bit about HLAA and what you do and how people can get involved in a more community-based level. I'll hold this microphone in case we have questions, so the podium is yours.
Okay, thank you, Emily. And thank you, everyone, for attending this special event that we have here, learning more about cochlear implants. And I am president of the Hearing Loss Association of America, the local chapter, which is the West Valley chapter. We just, in December, celebrated 40 years of providing local support to people here in the West Valley in Phoenix. Our local chapter was started 3 years after the national chapter was started in Washington, D.C. It was an organization that an individual called Rocky Stone, who was a retired CIA agent and was a person with hearing loss, was amazed that there was no support back then 43 years ago for people with hearing loss. So he started it in his home, and it has grown to be the most, the largest, the most successful, the most advocating organization to support people with hearing loss. And so here in the West Valley, we have monthly meetings which provide information. They're right here in this very room at this very same time on the second Tuesday of the month. And we hope that if you're not a member, that you would consider joining us and hearing we share what our topics are about, hearing aids, hearing better, different solutions for hearing, because as you've heard them say, the cochlear implant isn't the end of everything. You need to get more support. You need to possibly use captioning that we have, and we do have our meetings captioned. We also, in this room and building, we're very fortunate to have what's called an induction loop. And we've just had a presentation earlier this month about the induction loop and the company OtoJoy, which puts that in. Emily made a comment about turning on her telecoil to hear through the induction loop. So it's a little bit more information you need to know about it, rather than me just talking about it. But it is, again, an assistive listening device to help you hear better, and the captioning. Right now, we do a lot of advocating for captioning services at large venues. Our vice president and treasurer do a lot of advocating for a group that is called Lifelong Learning. So again, a large presentation, they provide that support. So that just gives you, besides our monthly meetings, a little bit of information that we advocate for, and we can certainly find anything that you're interested in. So I'm delighted to see so many new faces here, and hope that you will consider coming back and joining our chapter and getting information. We do have information at the table in the back with a business card and pamphlet, how you can reach out and get in touch with me, and come to one of our meetings. They're lots of fun. So thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. Emily. Is there any question for Melanie? Sorry, I didn't want to clap with a microphone in my hand, but does anyone have any questions for Melanie and or HLAA they would be happy to answer? No? Okay, well, please be sure to register for the HLAA Walk for Hearing. That's usually in November, first weekend of November. It's usually in the East Valley somewhere, but it's a really great turnout, and I hope to see you there at some point. Okay, thank you so much, Melanie. I appreciate it. All right, I'm gonna have you hold that for a second. All right. Okay, so we are going to announce Lou in just a short moment, but we did have a question in the audience about insurance, so I do want to, answer that now. So insurance, Medicare, it does cover implants if you qualify. There's, again, the testing that is involved. There's a process. You have to provide all of the information, but typically, yes, insurance covers the implant because it's a medical necessity. I know, unfortunately, hearing aids are not, viewed that way, but if you are a cochlear implant candidate, it tends to cover the insurance. All right, any other questions for me? All right, without further ado, our guest of honor is about to show. We have Lou Ferrigno, the original Hulk. So he will be sharing his story. He's really funny, he's an awesome guy. So I think you'll be excited to hear what he has to say. So give me a round of applause for Lou Ferrigno, who's coming out. So Lou is going to share his story. I will still have a handheld microphone, and I will tag team with him to answer any questions that you have after his story. Okay, you have the floor.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay? All right, great. Phoenix, Arizona. Great to be back here. It's a little warmer here than California right now. Anyway, how are you, everybody? Good. Anyway, I want to talk briefly about myself before we get into Q&A. My whole life I've been wearing hearing aids. I've been hard of hearing my whole life. When I was very young, close to birth, I had a severe ear infection, and it caused me to lose like 85% of my hearing. I had what you call profound hearing loss. So my mother eventually, she would clap her hand, I wouldn't respond. They took me to the doctor. The doctor diagnosed me with this hearing loss, and they fitted me. This was about maybe 1954. I'm 71 now. They fitted me this old-fashioned hearing aid that strapped to the chest, and I would have the buttons sticking out of the ear. I was very self-conscious about it, and also at the same time being very introverted, and I had what you call like a severe speech impediment. So I studied lip reading. I went to the New York League for the Hard of Hearing twice a week to learn how to lip read, to communicate. And back then, hearing aids wasn't as popular as today. So then, my whole life as a kid being introverted, so I had a father that rejected me because I was not the perfect son. So I had to carry his pain. So in the meantime, while I was in school, I would read a lot of comic books to escape the pain from my imagination, because I used to read the whole comic books, Superman, Spider-Man. It was a great antidote for my feeling. And then over the time, I eventually, when I got older, I think maybe about, probably about maybe like 11, 12 years old, I started to wear the BTE. BTE means behind the ear hearing aid. And I only have one. And at the time, they said to me, switch the right ear to the left ear. This way, as I got older, if I bought a second hearing aid, it wouldn't reject it. So this has been a lifelong struggle for me. So then I got involved bodybuilding. I used to have a lot of comic books. I used to trade comic books for comic books. I should have saved the first comic book, the first Spider-Man, Superman, because it's worth millions of dollars, but I traded for a muscle magazine. I'm staring at the comic book, and I see this guy in the cover, a blonde-haired guy, posing as Dave Draper, Mr. Universe. I said, wow, Mr. Universe, and I saw the muscles. I thought maybe it was a cartoon, but it wasn't, because it was a real bodybuilder. So I took the magazine home, and I studied, I read it, and a friend of mine had weights down the street. I couldn't afford weights. So what I did, I got a cement pail that filled with cement. I put a broomstick in the middle. I made my own makeshift barbell. And I just loved the feeling of working out. So this was the beginning of my passion for me to survive, because I had nothing else. I could not participate in the team sport. Everything with me was solo. So basically, I grew up in an introverted childhood in Brooklyn. I went to school. It was very hard. It was very difficult for me in school because when it came to the teacher teaching class, she would face the blackboard, so I would miss out what she was saying. And I was too shy to say, listen, I have a hearing problem. I need to see your face because I didn't want to be ridiculed or be embarrassed. They got to the point that they were going to almost remove me from the school until action was taken. Then I would literally put in the front seat in the classroom from that day on to absorb as much information I can. So then over the course of the years, I ended up training. I became a bodybuilding champion, and then I ended up being in the movie, the docudrama Pumping Iron with your favorite governor, Arnold Schwarzenegger. So that changed the sport. But at the time, I remember whenever I worked out, I always would train in the gym without the hearing aid, because the hearing aid I was wearing at the time could not handle perspiration. So I'd be training with no hearing aids, and a lot of people knew that I was deaf. They would clap their hand, try to get my attention. I only would absorb maybe 20–30% of the conversation in the gym, but I loved going to the gym. These were the different hearing aids back then. And then eventually I ended up doing the whole TV series, and then I had to come out and tell the world, the public, that I have a hearing problem. Because for a long time I didn't say that because I didn't want to be rejected in Hollywood, so people thought maybe I'm from another country, maybe I was slow, if I was like speaking wise. So once I elaborated, talked about my hearing situation, the world accepted me. But then at the same time I had a speech impediment. But the good news is that I've wore 2 hearing aids my whole life. It's all about volume. I needed more power, more volume, because you know, you wear hearing aids help. A lot of times it's hard when you have to differentiate different sounds from background noise to closeness. So then I had a friend of mine, he was a former producer, he had perfect hearing. Over the course of the years, he ended up losing his hearing, and his word discrimination went down to 12%. It made him very nervous, and he did a lot of research about cochlear implant. He'd gone to classes and everything, then he told me one day he was going to have it done. Now, me personally, I was thinking about it, but I was kind of nervous because I thought at the time it was like brain surgery. I was told that if you have a cochlear implant, you can never go back to a hearing aid. I'll get to that later on. So he had the surgery. His word discrimination went from 12% to 95%. So that convinced me to do it. So 2 years ago, I went to see Dr. Luxford, and I had to, you have to be a candidate to have a cochlear implant. And once I had it done, I was very nervous, but it literally changed my whole life. I felt like I was reborn. The clarity, the S sound, the T sound, my own speech, the different sounds here, and different sounds I never heard before. This is my worst ear, my left ear. And I'm telling you that it's amazing what it's done, the technology, because I could have done it sooner. But I know you people are here and you want to hear the story, but I'm just telling you how much it affected me, because I should have done it 10 years ago. I don't want to be one of those people that sit around to like 80, 85, look back and say, I should have. Because a lot of time, 1 out of 3 Americans, I believe, that have a hearing loss, a lot of older people, sometimes people maybe 40, 50, 60s, begin to lose their hearing. They feel isolated, very frustrated, angry, and ashamed. But for me, I didn't want to live like that, because my passion is all about me maximizing my personal power. I want to be the best I can be. I do not believe competing with other people, mostly competing with myself. So I realized that the cochlear implant gave me a taste what almost perfect hearing is. I don't have perfect hearing, but I hear so much better, and it's so much easier for me to respond to questions, because my response now is very quick. Because usually when we have a hearing aid, you got to digest the information, then you respond. You have that fatigue after a while, all day wearing hearing aids. The best hearing aid in the world is not going to give you what cochlear does. So that's my story now. Let's have a Q&A question, but I feel reborn.
We have one question right over here, Cheryl.
I noticed your speech is very good.
Oh, thank you.
So did you start speech therapy when you were little?
Yes, in my 20s, I studied phonetic, meaning that I studied to speak by the feeling of my tongue. Because when you have a profound hearing loss, you can't hear the words inside the mouth, like the CH, SH, like the word change, where the tongue hits the palate. I didn't know that, so I only go by what people read lips. I would say the word like chef, C-H-E-F, like the chef in the kitchen. I would say chef, like change that. Instead of change something, change it now. But I did it for a long time. Sometimes I put marbles on my mouth to try to talk very clearly. But to me, it was like But I decided I had to do it to improve my own speech. And I had to literally think about each word every time I was speaking, because at the beginning phase, you had to do that, and it gets easier and easier. But I can't do it 24/7. But with the implant, it's made so much easier.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm gonna hang out up here with you, Lou.
Sure,
So
I'm not going to bite you.
we have a mic runner. Yeah.
My question is, when you did I'm over here. You did the part for Hulk Hogan on the TV set with all the people around the set making noise and stuff. How are you able to address the issues for yourself with your hearing?
Are you talking about now or before?
Before.
Before it was hard because I had to make sure that whoever talked to me, say anything, I would say, listen, I can't hear you. Please let me see your mouth. Read your lips. Because if I haven't mentioned that, then I would be lost. But I had to take extra action to tell people that I'm hard of hearing. I didn't like to hear the word hard of hearing. I didn't want to be treated like that. So I had to do it in order to film, because on the film set, most people probably everybody knew. And then sometimes people deactivate their speech to me, and I say, don't yell at me. But at the same time, they're trying to be helpful towards me.
Yeah, I know.
It's a tough situation. But you know something, in general, people really don't care. If you tell them to take action for yourself, you say, I have a hearing problem, I can't understand you, please talk to me directly, it's fine. But I fought it most of my whole life because I want to be treated like a perfect hearing person. But it's interesting that now with the technology, it's so much easier. Now you have the iPhone, you have texting, you have messages, so it's so much easier to communicate.
Well, I want to congratulate you how you improved your speech. Before it was very hard to understand you. I mean, you're a total different person. I do appreciate it.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Hey, Lou. Well, we have a lot of similarities, and mostly in the childhood, not the bodybuilding part. That I played football, but we don't want to talk about that. When I was a kid, I had the same issues you did in the classroom, where I had to be seated up front, and my parents would go to the school before school and say, my son needs to sit in the front row. I hated it, though. I was embarrassed, just like you were. I didn't like it, the feeling of being singled out like that, but I got used to it after a while. My question to you, though, is, nowadays, I'm a musician and a choir director, and
oh, wow.
Yeah, thanks. And I have hearing aids. I don't have the implant. And I want to think about getting one. How do you process music? How has it changed musically for you? Do you listen to music a lot? Do you use Bluetooth? How does it work? How does it work for you?
I did listen to music before, but I didn't embrace the music like now, because the problem, the interesting thing is when you have the implant, you're able to appreciate the inflection, the rhythm of the music. The sound, it's much more natural. It's analog, it's not digital. Like sometimes with hearing aid magnifies the music and the words. Sometimes you can't understand the words within the music. And so it makes it much of a difference. And I still listen to music, but it's much more relaxing, because especially now when I talk to people, like men and women, they talk to me, I can understand the inflection in the voice, like the different high and low, the way they speak. It's somewhat, the word is so much more natural. And the good thing about the implant, if I'm correct, once you have the implant done and you have a processor, you never lose any of that hearing to the day you passed on. It's with you for the rest of your life, because a lot of people lose their natural hearing, it starts to decline. But the thing is, once your word discrimination is under 40%, then I think you should consider a cochlear implant to become a candidate. There's a website called checkmyhearingaid.com. You get in touch with audiologists. If you're a candidate, then go for it, because the truth is that it's a very successful surgery, and it's very minimal. There's no pain, no stitches. They cut a incision under the ear. You go home the same day, and you're activated like 3 weeks later. Yeah. Thank you.
To add to that, with the way that our internal implant is designed, it's to preserve as much of your anatomical structures of the cochlea, that snail shell organ, as possible. And in addition to that, if you have any functional low frequency hair cells that are still programmed or still working well, like you're able to amplify those with the hearing aid, most people have some residual hearing post-operation. And so like that implant is not as thick or as stiff as it used to be when it was designed over 40 years ago. So we really are trying to preserve as much hearing as possible. However, if you have something like a progressive hearing loss like me, it doesn't matter if I have hearing preserved because I'm now completely deaf. That's not a result of the surgery itself. That's just my genetics. I got the lucky pick of the draw. But That's okay. I have sign language. I have access to sounds. It's merely a tool. And what is really great about our technology is it can be reprogrammed and programmed according to what your hearing situation is like. We have a lot of flexibility in what the audiologist can do to program it and optimize it to get you hearing your best. Okay.
I think there's a myth out there that people think everything's gone when you get that surgery, and they take everything out. I've heard that, so I'm glad you said that. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Yeah, he was saying that there's like we're debunking a myth because, you know, previously, and that would have been the case back in the day because of how large the electrode was before, like the design, where if you did implant a cochlear implant, whatever residual hearing you had at that time was typically, you know, eliminated, and that is just because of what the design of the implant was at the time. But it was also an inpatient surgery. It was also a horseshoe-shaped scar. All of these things have been fine-tuned and innovated to where it's not like that. It's a small incision, like Lou said, behind the ear, and you know, they don't shave hair. I have long curly hair, was dreading that. They did not shave my hair. So it's very different compared to what it was 40 years ago.
I have one more question over here.
One question, okay. Sorry.
Lou, I think all of us do speech reading, but the farther we get away, the harder it is to speech read. So are you using a telecoil to be used with a hearing loop?
You mean with the implant?
Mm-hmm. There's a telecoil right now. Do you have telecoil on?
No, with the implant. Okay.
Have you experienced that?
Yes, I did use the telecoil before. For example, for years I would fly, I used the telecoil, for example, to listen to music. I'm on movies, like, for example, on the computer. I've gone to places with the telecoil, but the nice thing about the implant, you have forward focus, meaning that you can hear more direct the person talking, and also if you're in a noisy environment, it adjusts itself. It makes it so much easier. Like, for example, I hear you so clear. Before the implant, I probably had to lean forward and get closer to you, hear what you're saying. So, but the thing is, with the implant, you really, I wouldn't say you don't have to use it, but if you really do need to, so with the implant, you have what you call Bluetooth. You can still wear a coil. I'm sure you can make a connection with Bluetooth if you want to receive, for example, something maybe far away. Am I correct?
For Bluetooth and telecoil, I mean, I'm putting it on just because we have other events to, you know, speak and listen, and I rather work smarter, not harder. So I have telecoil enabled right now, even though my voice is in my head. But, you know, I still utilize all assistive listening technology, visual cues. I don't need them, but I'd rather not be tired at the end of the day if I can help it.
That just spoke volumes to me as a hearing loop advocate and for telecoil advocates. I mean, if you're in a large church, you can't speech read, you can't hear, but with a telecoil and with the hearing loop, you can hear all of the music, all of the ups and downs.
I'll put it this way. I'm coming from a profound hearing loss. Do you have perfect hearing before?
Long time ago, 40 years ago.
That's a big difference. So people who had perfect hearing, they could gain almost close to my right, close as they can to back to perfect hearing. But for me, also it's new. So coming from a profound hearing loss, able to hear, to go from profound to moderate, almost close to normal, it's huge for me. But someone like you, if you have an implant, I mean, it's going to be an astronomical difference, big difference. Everybody varies. But the truth is that there's no comparison with a hearing aid compared to an implant. But the implant with the technology, you have Bluetooth, coil, there's so many things that are more advantageous.
I will say is I'm a huge proponent of working smarter, not harder. You are free to use whatever assistive listening technology, visual cues, whatever you need to help hear your best. Some people don't utilize any listening technologies. I very rarely use telecoil because I do use Bluetooth more often than not, or like a mini microphone, for example. But the options are there within our cochlear technology if you want to access that. Okay, we have some questions up here. Yeah.
Good for question.
Yeah.
Well, in talking about the telecoil, I have the cochlear implant, but unfortunately it was never completely programmed, and I probably will be coming to see Happy Ears. the telecoil in here is so good. If I take my headset off, I cannot hear even the voices of the lady across the table from me. But with the headset on and somebody's on a microphone, it's like my old hearing back when I was 20 years old. And I'll be 90 in a couple months now.
Well, happy early birthday.
Thank you.
I'm going to sign a contract now to be 90 like you. God bless you.
I've heard that now with the new implant, you can have an MRI. Is that correct?
That is correct. Our internal implant is MRI compatible up to 3.0 Tesla. So you will still need to remove the external sound processor. So just like you do your hearing aids, you hand that over, you go through the imaging. There's no pain or discomfort, but you can have an MRI up to 3.0 Tesla. If for whatever reason they need to have an MRI scan of that specific area where the implant is, or they need something that's a higher resolution, the magnet can be removed in an outpatient procedure. It's a very easily removable disc, so they're not taking out the entire implant. It's just the magnet, and then they put a sterile one in its place if you need to do that route. But I will say I've seen a neurologist. I have the previous generation technology that's not MRI compatible, and they usually suggest other alternatives. But the 600 series internal implant that we have is MRI compatible.
Also, for your information, though, once you have the implant, they never have to go back under the skin again to replace the implant. The only thing that changes is the outer apparatus there, the processor. But for the rest of your life, you can keep the implant under the skin, and you never have to go back in unless you have, a car accident, whatever. But the thing is that it's 100% effective under the skin.
So I have a question for you, Lou. Yep. Do you have any additional information or any insights about your story and your hearing journey before we completely open it up to questions? I know these are questions related to what you've already mentioned, but is there anything else you would like to add about your story?
I would say the fact that my story is the fact that I'm glad that I've taken action for myself to do something about the situation, because 10 years ago someone said to me, if you get an implant you can never go back to a hearing aid. I felt this doom, like doom for me, because what if something happened? But seeing other people go through the different changes, it made me much more confident. That's why, like I said, I should have done it 10 years ago. But the amazing thing is that to add to my story is the fact that I just want to see more people that have a problem with hearing, they need an implant, just go for it, because why suffer, why be frustrated, why fight with yourself? And also it affects your family, your friends, everything, and affects your own self-well-being. But that's my message to all of you, and I would say part of my journey too is that I don't have to struggle like I have to struggle before compared to now.
Thank you, Lou. Is there any other questions from the audience? I know there was a question about insurance. I covered that. But you have a question, sir?
I have one back here.
Oh, okay.
All right. Thank you, Lou, so much for coming and sharing with us today. But my question is, what is your favorite sound that you've gotten to experience now that you have your cochlear implant compared to when you were a child? Do you have one?
I like the waves of the ocean.
Beautiful.
Because I lived near a beach when I was in Brooklyn. I live near a beach now. So anytime I'm close to the ocean, I can appreciate the real sound of the ocean wave. And it gives me more feeling towards it than just the sound of the wave. It's more the rhythm, the more that beauty of the sound. The soothing sound I like. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's probably one of my favorites too. It just used to sound like a roar. There was no distinctive crashing of the waves. It was just a constant.
Exactly.
And now you're able to actually hear the impact of that wave crashing.
Then you should live close to the beach.
One day. One day I will.
Isn't she great? Amazing, just bilateral, amazing.
Thanks.
I love what you said about the ocean. That's beautiful. I can't wait to hear that someday. My question to you is, I'm so sorry for taking over this microphone so much, but I've got so many questions. When you received when you received it, how long did it take you to train yourself to hear, honestly? And what kind of obstacles did you have to overcome once you had the implant?
Well, once you have the implant, they give you 3 activation. They're maybe like 2 or 3 weeks apart. When you first activate it, some people hear some words, some people like myself, they told me ahead of time, I hear like church bells, robotic sound, but you have to be comfortable because it's part of the brain adjusting to the ear nerve, everything. But the idea, the most important thing is that once you have an implant, they give you different apps. You have to work at it. It's almost like working out to get in shape. You just can't sit home. I mean, of course it's going to improve, but if you want to optimize, you want to get 100%, they have a different app called Angel app. They give you 4 words, and you got to pick the word. Otherwise, the words sound similar. It gives you 4 different words. Like, for example, you say, like, the judge, hudge, such, and you pick the different one word out of the 4. For me, at the beginning, it was tough. It was maybe like 36%. I eventually got to maybe like 95%. And also, the beauty about it is the fact that if you're training your ears, you're going to train your ears like ear muscles. The same thing. After 6 months, you should be able to derive 100% the benefit of the implant.
It does vary, you know, based on hearing history, like I mentioned. So if you've never heard sounds or intelligible speech at one point in time, it will take longer to adapt, to adjust. If you've been deaf in that ear and never wore amplification, for example, and then you're getting a cochlear implant, you know, realistic expectations are key. An analogy I use is that they're just slowly opening that window of sound for you so as not to overstimulate you, so that it's not overwhelming, and that, you know, with those activation appointments, like Lou was saying, they're slowly going to be opening that window of sound so it's loud enough, it's comfortable, you know, in terms of volume, and you're willing to tolerate that and keep working that muscle and keep going back for those follow-up visits.
Thank you. My question is that you said you're training yourself to hear better. If you stop that training, does your body start to revert back to what it was before?
No, it's you know, if you've had access to sounds and speech before, it's just retraining your brain on how to hear. And you're practicing that muscle, you know, you're working that muscle. If you don't wear the cochlear implant sound processor, you know, all waking hours of the day, it will take you longer to adjust. But it doesn't revert the process. Your brain already knows what it knows, and once you have access to that, it should be, you know, it's more of like an uphill process from there, and then it will plateau eventually, but it doesn't decline.
All right, thank you.
Well, what's interesting, there's an app also, a nuclear app. They had different conversation. You listen to the different conversation, and they give you 3 questions about the conversation. Like, for example, say you want to book a restaurant, and the woman calls you, she says, okay, I want an appointment for 7:50 p.m. Saturday, and what's the name of the address? Give you the address. Then the 3 questions will ask you the question, what the conversation was about. Now, this is my bad ear, and I was able to gather maybe like 100% of the question to get each question right, because this is the bad ear alone. But your question, though, for example, like myself, I think you can always keep improving. Otherwise, like after 3 or 4 activations, 3 or 4 months, don't stop to keep working, because the more the brain adjusts, the easier you'll be able to understand the different words. It's amazing over time. It's almost like I still even practice now, even though 2 years later, I still practice more, because it's almost like keeping yourself in shape than just basically going on a plateau.
Yes.
Is there any medical condition that would prevent an implant from helping the situation?
That's a good question. So the question is there any medical condition that would prevent you from getting a cochlear implant? There is a variety of things that would make it, you know, make it a contraindication. So if you do not have a present hearing nerve on that side, there's no nerve to stimulate. So that would be a contraindication. And so another means of providing access to amplification, you know, it rules out some things, but there are other alternatives, like a bone conduction hearing device, for example. It would stimulate your better hearing nerve if you have one. If you have neurofibromatosis type 2, where you have the constant growth of tumors on the auditory nerves, like these are things that are very rare, but you know, it would be a contraindication. Again, if you have had profound deafness for many years and you have not used hearing technology, you have not done that, it's not necessarily a contraindication, but realistic expectations are key, because if you've had profound deafness all your life, and so for example, like I have a lot of culturally deaf friends who sign and they've never worn hearing aids because they don't need it, they don't use that as their means of communication, but sound awareness would be their realistic expectations at minimum, you know, so there's more room for that, there's more opportunity for that. But you know, those realistic expectations kind of change depending on their case history.
Emily, I might just add to that real quick. For medical history and health for a cochlear implant, the biggest thing is that you're healthy enough to undergo general anesthesia, and you can work with your primary care doctor and the surgeon that would do the surgery to determine that. What I see more often is maybe they'll keep you overnight for monitoring instead of it being an outpatient procedure if there's something they're concerned about. But again, that's something that you can work with your physician on.
If they have heart issues, have you seen that as a setback or just more frequent monitoring if they have heart issues?
Can't confidently answer that. I haven't run into it too much in my experience. It just would depend on the heart condition, if your heart is healthy enough. So I would consult your cardiologist.
Yeah, and we have patients who are 101 years old, 103 years old getting a cochlear implant. It's really more about improving quality of life. But again, if you're not healthy enough to withstand the general anesthesia, that's also a contraindication, not just the anatomical portion of that. Oh, one question in the middle.
Hello, nice to see you. I enjoyed your shows.
Oh, thank you.
My question is, well, I was born hard of hearing, profound hearing loss. I wore a body aid, like you said. My question is background noise has always been an issue. You do well in restaurants if you had trouble before?
You mean now compared to before?
Yeah.
Well, now because I'm wearing the Nucleus 8, they have what you call forward focus. It means that you hear the person more direct in the noisy environment. Otherwise, you go from 180 degrees down to more narrow to the person. It's much easier to understand. And maybe you could explain more in detail about the forward focus.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a pretty fascinating tool. So cochlear implants were designed first and foremost to be a speech sound processor above everything else. So it's always wanting to look for in your environment. We have a processing strategy in our Nucleus 8 sound processor called Scan. It's our adaptive listening technology that will adjust according to the noise levels in your environment. But there is something called forward focus that is an additional part of that scan technology. And what that does is once the noise gets to a certain level, it will suppress even further background noise that's behind you. It will enhance even further the speech that's in front of you. So wherever you're looking, that voice is being amplified and everything else is being reduced so you can hear them better.
The big difference is hearing aids, you can do that like Bluetooth, but the big difference is with a cochlear implant, clarity. That's a big difference, because if you have great clarity, you understand the conversation, you understand the words. With not good clarity, then you're going to struggle, and then you're going to be like, everything gets jumbled, mixed up with the words and the background noise.
Have you had trouble with the facial stimulation during the programming?
Facial stimulation? No.
Oh, okay.
No, because when they do the implant, they work around the nerve, the facial nerve, but that's a surgeon's job. But I never had any trouble. No.
It's uncommon for that to occur, but there are programming adjustments that can be made to overcome that so that's not present. But we do have safeguards in place with the surgeon, so they make sure that they have adequate placement of the internal implant during surgery. But we do have alternatives in terms of programming on the audiologist side of things if that does occur. And it's for a variety of reasons, but again, it's not common.
You're welcome.
You have great questions. It's okay.
I promise. It's a good question. Once you have your implant in, is there any adjustments you make on it anyway, or is all of the adjustment made by the doctor?
Well, if you see the audiologist, they make an adjustment for you here, the best you can work with the implant. But on the iPhone, they have an app. Also, it's like treble and bass. You can adjust the volume yourself. You have what you call a remote. You can adjust the volume, and also you can work with audiologists remotely with the iPhone or whatever phone apparatus you have, even though you may be 200 miles away. And yourself, you could, like for example, on my app, Nucleus, you have treble and bass, and you can adjust it yourself, because over time, you become your own audiologist, adjusting yourself to different sounds want to pick up that for example, pro and con, you can make the adjustment yourself, because the problem with the hearing aid, you have to constantly go and see a hearing aid specialist. They have to make the adjustment on the computer. You cannot do that by yourself. So that's the difference with the implant. You have so much more technology, so more advantages with the iPhone, the attachment, the Nucleus app.
Right.
So similar to a hearing aid, you have programs you can adjust in the apps. Very similar to that, we have a cochlear implant app. It's a Nucleus Smart app. So adjusting the bass and the treble, things like that, enabling streaming to your accessories if they are paired appropriately. Find My Sound Processor, so if you're nervous about losing them, there's an app, like a section of that will tell you where the processor was last located before losing it. Also battery life. So there's a lot of cool features. And what Lou is referencing with the remote programming with the audiologist, we have something called remote check and remote assist. If your audiologist participates in this, you can have virtual